Hey, what's going on? It's the series making music analysis simple. Today we're looking at why some listeners think Unholy by Sam Smith and Kim Petras sounds Arabic. Sam Smith has described Unholy as the start of their villain era. It's a far cry from the lovelorn soul and tasteful R&B they're best known for. Instead, we get a raunchy hyperpop influenced track, a favoured style of Sam's co-star, Kim Petras. Unholy stands out in part because of the scale, the series of musical notes that it's based on. In modern Western pop music, we're most used to hearing the major scale or the natural minor scale. In these types of scale, there's a small gap of either one or two semitones from each note to the next. A semitone is the smallest gap or interval we can have from one note on a piano to the next. In major and minor scales, the interval from the first note to the second is always two semitones. In contrast, Unholy uses the Phrygian dominant scale, which is much less common in Western pop. This includes a flattened second, meaning the second note is a semitone lower than we might expect. As a result, the scale includes an interval of only one semitone from the first note to the second. This creates quite an ominous sound, which helps to add some friction to the bass line of Unholy. But that's not the only feature of the Phrygian dominant scale that's worth talking about. The step from the second note to the third is augmented. It's three semitones, not one or two. When used in a melody, like the string lines in Unholy, this can stick out to Western listeners. So, is it the Phrygian dominant scale's flattened second and its augmented step that sound Arabic? Kind of. The scale is used in some Arabic music, as well as klezmer, flamenco, and other styles. But we also hear an augmented step as being exotic because we've been primed to do so. For example, film scores might use the Phrygian dominant scale as a simplistic cultural signifier. If Unholy sounds Arabic, that's partly because we've subconsciously internalized that association. Either way, it's interesting to see how this use of the Phrygian dominant causes the song problems. Let's explain. The first note of a scale is called the tonic. This feels like home, a natural resting point. If the seventh note of a scale is a semitone below the tonic, it's a leading note, which leads us home. Moving from leading note to tonic sounds satisfying and stable, so it helps to orientate the listener. In a natural minor scale, the seventh note is two semitones below the tonic, so it isn't a leading note. To solve this, we can raise the seventh note, turning it into a harmonic minor scale, which does have a leading note. But now we have an augmented step. These can be awkward to sing, so Western melodies often avoid them. To solve the melodic problem, we can use another scale, the melodic minor, to even out this interval. Let's see how the Phrygian dominant scale fares in comparison to the minor scales we've just seen. We know that we have that troublesome augmented step from the second note to the third. In fact, Sam Smith has to fudge the scale to avoid this when singing the words something unholy. But the seventh note is still two semitones below the tonic, so we don't have a leading note either. That partly explains why the bass line and chord progression stay the same for the whole song. We don't have that stable tonic leading note relationship to orientate us, so travelling too far may risk confusing the listener. So the Phrygian dominant is the worst of both worlds, with an augmented step but no leading note. Before we wrap up, help the channel out by taking a second to like and subscribe. Unholy wasn't wrong to use the Phrygian dominant scale. In fact, it wouldn't have been nearly as catchy without it. But it's interesting to see the problems that it caused, especially in terms of limiting the harmony. The scale doesn't neatly fit into the norms of Western pop, so we're not used to hearing it in this context. Maybe that's another reason why, for some listeners, its association with Arabic music remains so strong. Look out for the Apocopop song review of Unholy, and let us all know what song you'd like to see analysed next. Or try the analysis of Pink Venom by Blackpink, which uses the Phrygian dominant scale in an even stranger way. And for early access, consider supporting the channel on Patreon. See you next time.